What's up, everybody? It's the Digital World Podcast, and we're going to focus on this interview by Brad Garlinghouse because he has a lot of gold nuggets in this. So let's get into it.
Just give us an update on the situation with the SEC. Where do things stand? Obviously, you intend to fight this vigorously.
Thanks for having me, Emily. Indeed, we do intend to fight it vigorously. From our point of view, what has happened here isn't really just a lawsuit against Ripple. It's really against the crypto industry at large. As you know, and as you and I have talked about on this show, that the U.S. has been a laggard in providing regulatory clarity so that investors know how to best invest and entrepreneurs can build companies and hire people.
So he said that this lawsuit isn't just on Ripple, it's on the industry at large. And we've been knocking out on this point in several episodes that this isn't just for Ripple, this is for the whole crypto industry. And if people aren't ready and they don't have that regulatory clarity, or if digital assets, don't have that regulatory clarity, they're going to be scrambling for it. So that's why it's good that Ripple is the first one. They're dealing with the issues now, but they'll be the first to have that clarity, and all the money will flow into it.
Ironically, a lot of countries around the world have had that regulatory clarity. Just here in the U.S., we've kind of lagged that. So the UK, Japan, Singapore, Switzerland all have very clear regulatory frameworks. And actually, ironically, on the topic of the lawsuit the SEC has brought against Ripple, the only country on the planet that has viewed XRP as a security is the United States SEC in bringing that lawsuit.
So, is there a chance of a settlement? And what happens if you lose?
So, look, I'm hopeful that as a new administration comes into the SEC, there's an opportunity to revisit some of those conversations. As you may know and may recall, Jay Clayton, as the chair of the SEC, the day before he left office, he brought this lawsuit against Ripple and against me personally, against Chris Larsen personally. And, we don't think that made a lot of sense given that XRP had been trading in the marketplace for 8 years. Literally nearly $1 trillion of XRP has traded out there. And so to do that the day before he leaves his position, right a couple days before Christmas, I think was misguided. And as Mary Jo White, the former head of the SEC, has said publicly that she views this as a dead wrong. The SEC is dead wrong on this decision. I'm hopeful with Gary Gensler, the likely new chair of the SEC, likely to be confirmed here in a couple of weeks. There's an opportunity to have a conversation with that new leadership as he brings his team in on what can be done that's constructive for Ripple and really for the whole crypto industry to provide that clarity and allow people to participate in these markets and to build companies around these technologies.
Now, I just want to add in real quick. He's been mentioning how all these other nations have the clarity on how to use XRP. And so, why haven't they been using it then? Why don't they just go right on with it? And that's because the United States is a leader in all this. It may seem like we're lagging behind, like we're the last one to get going. But no, I think all these other nations need to be ready and prepared so that when the U.S. says it's ready and everything is assembled and ready to go, everyone's all on board. And so that's why, in my opinion, that's what I think it is. It's giving all these other nations an opportunity to get prepared with their regulations, and the U.S. will then follow because the U.S. is a superpower. They have all the innovation. And so I think this is why it would make sense. And I believe that the U.S. holds the presidency in the G7, or they're the leader of the G7. And so that's an interesting point right there. So it's getting everything ready for what's about to happen. And I do not believe, and it might be an unpopular opinion, that with all this narrative going on in the news right now, that the U.S. is lagging behind with the digital dollar and with everything, I'm not buying it for 1 second. I do think that it's an opportunity for all the nations to get on board Once they're all on board, then the U.S. will proceed.
Meantime, we're waiting for the Coinbase direct listing, which continues to be postponed. Our sources are telling us that's because of a backup at the SEC. But what are you watching for there in terms of whether or not that is a success or some sort of validation that the crypto market needs?
Well, look, I think it's very clear that the crypto markets at large have become, very mainstream, and there's more and more institutional interest. I mean, my guess is about a year ago, the market overall might have been a few $100 billion, and now it's just below $2 trillion. And that only happens with lots of institutional money entering that market. Coinbase has built an amazing business here in the United States. I suspect that will be a very successful listing, and there continues to be a lot of interest in this space. And there's a lot of different ways to invest in this space, and Coinbase has clearly been a leader, and so I'm excited to see them get out as a public company.
Meantime, I spoke with the CEO of Kraken yesterday, Jesse Powell, smaller crypto exchange, much smaller than Coinbase. But take a listen to what he had to say about price.
I think I said Bitcoin's going to infinity, and that's kind of hard to comprehend because I'm measuring it in terms of dollars, and it might be easier to understand if we measure it, like in terms of Teslas, right? Like now 1 Bitcoin for 1 Model 3, or, probably by the end of the year, I think it'll be 1 Bitcoin per Lambo, and probably by the end of next year, it'll be 1 Bitcoin per Bugatti. So, I think that to me and to the crypto community, I think those kinds of assets make it easier to measure Bitcoin against because you never know where the dollar is going to be.
1 Bitcoin per Lambo, 1 Bitcoin per Bugatti.
Now, before Brad speaks, I kind of want to preface it by saying that I understand, if Bitcoin is allowed to keep on trading as it is now without any kind of regulation, it can reach large sums of money. However, I want you to see the narrative that he puts out there. He mentions Bill Gates. He talks about the inefficiencies of Bitcoin and how it can be similar to using 75 gallons of gasoline. Okay, so everything that's being said and the narrative that he's putting out there is foreshadowing what can come down the line. And whether, they outlaw it or they heavily tax any kind of proof of work coin or anything of that sense, will be interesting to keep notice of in the future. Now listen to his response.
Where do you think it's going, Brad?
Look, I think it's very clear that Bitcoin is solving a real problem for people who want exposure to this asset class. And as Jesse, I saw that interview. That was very well done.
And he says it solves a real problem, and then he's like, he's trying to think of what problem it solves, and then he said, well, the problem of people who want exposure. I mean, maybe he's being too nice here about it, but that's not solving a problem. It's a good marketing campaign for the rest of the space, but definitely not a problem that it solves. And he's being nice about it. But here, let me keep on playing it.
I think, as Jesse said, there is a lot of inflationary dynamics of some of the major fiat currencies. M2 money supply here in the United States grew about 25% year on year. But I also think we have to remember, and as Bill Gates was quoted recently saying that Bitcoin as a payment mechanism is amongst the least efficient payment mechanisms that man has ever created, because as the price of Bitcoin goes up, the energy consumption and the carbon footprint of a proof of work, that mining that happens to validate transactions, that continues to scale aggressively also. And I think we can't lose sight of the fact that one Bitcoin transaction is the equivalent of about 75 gallons of gasoline being burned.
I'm glad you said that, Brad, because Bill Gates said that on this show, said that he was not a fan of Bitcoin specifically because of all the energy it uses. So what's the solution?
Well, to be clear, I am a fan of Bitcoin. I just think we need to be clear about what problem it's solving. And as a store of value, as kind of digital gold, I think Bitcoin is exceptional. Moreover, I think Bitcoin, like the Ethereum network, both Bitcoin and Ethereum use proof of work to validate transactions. But Ethereum, I think, has been the kind of some of the developers behind that project have been very forward-looking and realizing that the power consumption is a real problem and have been migrating to a different and much more efficient technology. We at Ripple use the XRP ledger because it's extremely fast and it's about 100,000 times more energy efficient than Bitcoin. So in that context, it works really well for payments. And the reason why we've had so much success gaining customers and continue to scale our business, even in the face of this SEC lawsuit, has been because it works. It solves a real problem. It scales well, and the cost efficiencies are very real.
And so I want to point out how he mentions Bitcoin, and then he mentions Ethereum, and then Ripple. So he doesn't mention that Bitcoin's trying to move out of its inefficiencies and try to upgrade or innovate. He doesn't say anything about that. And then he shares Ethereum. He says, yeah, they realize that they need to innovate and get away from, the proof of work, because it's not scalable and it's inefficient, right? And then he ends by talking about XRP. And XRP talks about its efficiencies, its scalability, and how fast it is, and which is a drastic comparison to Bitcoin and Ethereum. So it's out there. The narrative is out there, and it's building. And before long, you're gonna see climate change be the mainstream narrative. And if you haven't seen my last episode with George Gammon, you better watch it. Hope this episode has brought you some value. Like and subscribe, and get ready for the climate change narrative coming your way. This is the Digital World Podcast, and I'll see you in the next episode.